We are going live here on You Be the Judge. Thank everyone for showing up on You Be the Judge. We're live here on your Facebook and all your Instagram and all of your social medias. I'd like to thank everyone for joining us every Wednesday at 6 p.m. at You Be the Judge. We're here to talk about information, understanding, and action. While we wait on our guests today, I just want to say thank everyone for supporting the show for as long as they have. We've been getting things right and getting things wrong, but the first thing I like to say is that we're learning. Marilyn, my beautiful co-host, and I know Judge Claudia Barber could be on her way. So how was your week, Marilyn? You had an event. You woke up early this morning.
My week was great, and you must have written a note to yourself or something like that. I'd like to turn the camera around just so I could see your screen where it says, make sure
it's a sticky note.
Exactly.
It's a
I knew it. You had to write it down. That's okay. I know the way it works. Yes, I was up 4-ish in the a.m. this morning. and I know I'm being redundant, but it just feels like, oh my God. Wow. I have newfound respect for people who have to work those sorts of hours. Our bodies, I don't think, were just made for hours like that. It was beautiful, though. The colors in the sky without all that light pollution, it was just gorgeous.
So, if most of you people don't know, and hopefully you heard the shows, that Marilyns running for Circuit Court Judge at Montgomery County in Maryland. So, but the question is why were you up so early, and who were you visiting with and campaigning with?
Well, I was up so early because I was canvassing at there's some people who take the bus really, really early to go to work.
That's right.
And so when they get home, they're not really interested in looking at literature and things like that. I'm not sure they're interested in looking at campaign literature that early in the morning either, but it was harder for them to say no because they knew how hard we were trying. And it was fun. We got to meet some really, really interesting people. It's always wonderful to go canvassing and shake hands with everyone out there. Everybody is just so interested. I really, really enjoy canvassing.
I actually think as a community, I know you're running for Circuit Court Judge, and I know people do it for different issues, more often running for an election. But I actually think, and I taught door knocking for years, but I actually think people ought to go out and door knock just to build their own community within their community. So then they get to really understand and listen to their neighbors and maybe they can join a friendship or however. I think this is such an earth building thing to do that people don't do enough.
I agree. Yeah, just especially nowadays with COVID and I'm hoping we're in the back end of it. Did you hear the report saying that 60% of all Americans have had COVID and 75% of all American children have had COVID? And that they are probably, they've had it, which is kind of interesting because that means that a lot of people have had it and didn't even know they had it. So what do you think, Holly? Because you were shaking your head. So
I just had this conversation. It's amazing how many people have had it and how sanguine people are now about it.
Yeah, and I think the reason why they're so sanguine is because like, hey, we're out, we're looking at it in the rearview mirror now. Is the way a lot of people feel about it, and I hope so. I really, really hope so. Although there's some things I wish we could keep. I really love Zoom. I should have bought stocks in it.
If we had known prior, right.
And ever since the pandemic, I've only been to court in person 3 times. Yay! And those 3 times I said to myself and to other people there, we could have done this virtually. Save ourselves the gas, the aggravation, and everything else. So I really, really love that. But there's some events that you have to do in person. For instance, tomorrow I am having a meet and greet at the Caribbean Society Lounge in Silver Spring. And I see that our guest has joined us, so we're going to go to her.
Well, not yet, but tell us about the meet and greet at Silver Spring. What time is it at?
Oh, it is from 6 to 8 p.m. We're going to be discussing my campaign, why I'm running for judge, why it's important to know who's running for judge, and why people should vote for that and continue to vote for that, as opposed to what some legislatures are trying to do, which is take away people's rights to vote for circuit court judges who are not appointed, which to me is a voter disenfranchisement issue.
And before we get on to our special guest, and thank her for showing up, I want to share my screen here real quick, because we are having an event that's coming up here in July 8th, and it's to save this date. The Caucus of African American Leaders of Maryland are putting on an amazing event here at Morgan. And what's going to happen is that we're getting together, it's nonpartisan, but we're getting together to not just discuss the crisis in the Black community, but to put together a policy and a plan for the Black community. And we are inviting all leaders who are appointed, who sit in offices, anyone who has grassroots, come. Anyone who wants to be involved with anything from the Eastern Shore to the Western Shore. I know people who listen to this outside the states and outside the Maryland. If you want to be involved, you can contact me or just show up July 8th and 9th. We're going to have some national speakers there. It's just going to be an event where we put together a policy and a plan to solve the crisis in the Black community. I did want to show that to you, and then we'll get right back to our special guest. If anyone has any questions with me, you can always contact me with Dr. Paul Dyer at gmail.com, or just contact the show. So, Tonya,
before you move on to our guest, I'm sorry, Miss Sweat. Let me just say,
she's late anyway.
Such a beautiful, engaging poster, and I know we're going to hear more specifics about it as we go along, because the agenda is going to be set and things of that sort. I did want to point out the wordplay in the word community. I just love that. Yeah. You know, I hope everybody noticed the way that it was done. That was beautiful.
I will bring that back up again, and you can totally guess, because that is important. Go ahead.
Mm-hmm. Well, like I said, I love the wordplay, the word community, the way that they have it written down there, because it is, I mean, there is unity in community, and that is very much what they're trying to play. And I look forward to the event. I have it on my calendar already. I look forward to attending and meeting a lot of people that I already know there, and meeting even more people that I don't know yet. Making new friends and saying hello to old friends.
It's going to be important. Actually, what's sick and sad is that this has never happened in Maryland. And the only time it has happened, it was in Gary, Indiana in 1972.
Ooh.
So this event is so historical, and it's sickening that it's so historical, because not everyone comes together to discuss, to plan, and to take action. We always do it in these pockets, in either our county or our township or our block, or and still the community gets disenfranchised. But enough of that pontificating. Tonya, welcome to Bridges Live. You be the judge, and tell us about yourself, and we'll get right into grilling you on why do you think you should win, and go from there.
First of all, thank you for having me. Secondly, I do apologize for being a few minutes late. When you talk about grassroots, I'm running a grassroots campaign, which means I'm doing a lot of the work myself. So I go from one event to the next, and the computer doesn't always work as fast as I want it to. So I'm grateful to be here, though. But yes, I am running for county executive in Prince George's County. And the whole wordplay thing is huge tonight, Ms. Pierre, because the theme of my campaign is one county, one community. And I'm running for county executive because this started honestly out of anger. I am a former federal attorney. I have 25 plus years of experience as a public servant. I've served in the United States Air Force, worked for the federal government as a financial regulator, and I decided in January of 2014 to take a sabbatical from my professional career, or at least I thought I was taking a sabbatical. I tell everyone I am what you hear when people talk about a Black mother and a Black son. I left my job because I wanted to ensure that my son got through high school with good grades, without getting in any trouble, and with his life and his limb intact. And I became a PTA mom. And in becoming a PTA mom, I learned a lot about the failures of our public education system here in Prince George's County, and that angered me. And I figured, as an attorney with federal experience, having been educated in the public school system, being the daughter of a retired master teacher from the South Carolina public school system, I thought I had something to offer. So I put on my advocacy hat, put on my community activist hat, started knocking on the doors of school board members, knocking on the doors of county council members, talking to even delegates and state senators in the General Assembly to do everything I could, I thought anyway, to make improvements in our public school system here in Prince George's County. I even met with the governor and the lieutenant governor to talk about the issue. Nothing happened. In the 7 years of community activism and child advocacy and PTAing and writing comments on legislation, the needle didn't move. And so I got frustrated, extremely frustrated. I still have a child in the public school system in Prince George's County. She's in the 4th grade. And so not being able to influence those in power, if you will, those in authority to make the necessary changes to improve our education system, I then started looking at other areas of local government to see, okay, what is really going on? If education is in this predicament, I needed to understand whether there was some other vulnerabilities in our local government that we were not paying attention to. And sure enough, I found them. And again, you start talking to your elected officials, you start advocating in the community, you make suggestions, and people look at you like, who are you and what makes you think you have a voice or a right to make these suggestions? What makes you think you can do it better? And I sat on it for a while because I'm not a fan of politics. I've worked practically my entire career behind the scenes supporting professional politicians, whether they were general officers in the United States military or elected officials in the federal government or appointed officials in the federal government. I was always working for politicians. So I know the game. I know how politics works. I know the horse trading that happens. I know the deals that are made. And I know those deals don't always benefit the people. I also know the money it takes to be successful in politics. And I know what people do, the deals they make to get the money. So I'm not a fan of politics. I didn't want to run for office. This was never on my bucket list. However, sitting in my house one day, venting to my husband about my adventure of the day, if you will, it hit me like a box of rocks. Why do you continue to ask people to do what you know how to do yourself? And what are you afraid of? What are you running from? What is the problem? And so I had to literally find the courage within me to say, okay, even though I don't like politics, I hate it, I'm going to throw my hat in the ring and I'm going to run, because honestly, at this point, that's the only way I'm really going to make a difference in the lives of the children of Prince George's County, the elders of Prince George's County, the disenfranchised, the underserved, the low income, and the marginalized in Prince George's County. And so here I am. And I tell everyone that I meet, I'm not doing this for me, because I'm doing okay. My husband and I can ride off into retirement, and we won't have a care in the world. Even though we still have a 10-year-old we got to get through school, she's fairly intelligent. So, I mean, her brother got a full scholarship to college, and he's doing okay. And she may not get a full scholarship, but her father and I have the ability and the resources to help her get through college. So this is personal, but it's not personal at the same time. All I'm doing at this point is offering my background, my training, my education, my experience, my knowledge to the people of Prince George's County, with the hopes that if it is accepted, I can use those skills to make their lives a little bit better, to improve our county, and to make us what many like to call us, the shining light of Maryland, to demonstrate that while we are or may be considered the most affluent African-American county in the nation, it's not just about the gross income we bring in because of our ties to the federal government. We are affluent because we are a rich people, we are an intelligent people, and we can work together and be that example in the state and in the nation for what a diverse and minority-ruled county can do if given a fair shot.
Well, I tell you, Tonya, besides having horns blow and confetti come on down from after that long soliloquy of what you said, I am so troubled that you had to become angry. I'm saddened by that, but I get your sentiment. I get a lot of people's sentiment. For me, working in the community and grassroots, and I'm not going to hold it against you that you were flipping Air Force, because I'm Army, and I know Marilyns Army too. So we will not hold that against you at all.
Well, Paul, we already know that Army is number one anyway. So right. We could let Tonya have number two. That's okay.
Y'all can't get anywhere without us, so stop the madness.
Oh, we take Navy.
We have been getting everywhere without you. We were here before you. We will be here after you.
You absolutely were.
We let you do some things. You guys won't even let your uniforms get dirty. Somebody told me the other day, an Air Force person said, well, I didn't like my uniforms getting dirty. That's why I joined the Air Force. I'm like, what?
Oh, wow.
Which is so true. She's like, I was in the Army, and, the Army people, they're always getting dirty.
That's true.
Because they're out in the ground doing stuff. And so I changed to the Air Force because I wanted clean uniforms. But that says a lot about the Air Force. That's all I'm going to say.
We tend to be the prima donnas of the Department of Defense.
And we all have to know throughout all the armed forces, hands down, the best mess hall in the military is the Air Force.
That's true.
It's just true.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So the other thing you said, Tonya, and you said you became an angry woman, and an angry black woman people are afraid of. When you start knocking on lieutenant governors' doors and you start knocking on people's doors and you realize there's things that there's not getting done and you uncovered something. Would you like to talk about the one or two things you uncovered that was just like, what in the HE double hockey sticks is going on, and why has this not been taken care of? Is it because you found out that people are getting paid under the table? Because you kind of mentioned that on the slide. I'm not going to let that slip. and you also mentioned that people were not having a response, even though that we elect people because we hire them to do the work we cannot do. That's just plain and simple. And then when we try to reach out to them and they're not taking our phone calls, they're not responding to us, we should be angry. I agree. We as a community, as a people, as a nation should be angry. And because we get so angry, we either get apathetic or we get volatile. But what we don't normally do is get to action and get to work. So how would you like to respond to that? There's several questions in there.
Several questions in there. So, a couple of things. I'm originally from South Carolina. I don't know if you consider that a plus or minus.
That's South Kakalaki to us.
Absolutely, South Kakalaki. And the interesting thing about being from South Carolina is, I tell people I grew up in the heart of Dixie. Okay, I grew up during Jim Crow. I was born in 1972, and so growing up in South Carolina with the Confederate flag over my head, yeah, I know what it's like to have to deal with the majority who are not exactly charitable when it comes to the social safety net. I get it. I tell people I grew up eating government cheese, and I thought Reagan was doing a great thing because he was giving us cheese. Little did I know it wasn't as great as I thought, but I didn't learn that until I got to the University of South Carolina. And that was a life-changing, eye-opening experience for me because I was taught then by Caucasian professors, and a few of them picked up the notion that I was fairly intelligent and had a pretty decent IQ. And so they were willing to mentor me, take me under their wing, and teach me some of the rules of the game that you just don't learn in K through 12 school. I then stayed at the University of South Carolina to go to law school. And again, that expanded and broadened my experience when it comes to making deals. I mean, I tell people I don't drink and I don't smoke, but I learned to drink single malt scotch and smoke cigars in law school. I played golf once in my life, but I understand the significance of the golf course. And so because I was able to make acquaintances in the right places, shall we say, I learned some rules that normally I don't think most African Americans would learn. I got exposed to stuff that normally we don't get exposed to. So when I got to Maryland, fast forward 20 some years later, I was surprised because Maryland is not as progressive as people want us to believe.
Not even close.
And I'll say this. I don't have a problem.
Can we stop there for just one moment? Which one do you think is worse? Knowing that a place is not progressive, or thinking that it's progressive, but it's not as progressive as it is supposed to be?
Thinking it is horrible, especially when you're thinking that you're progressive and you have a 6-figure salary and you're driving a Mercedes-Benz or a BMW, or in these days a Tesla, and you're living in a $500,000 home and you think you're doing something. And that's what I ran into in Prince George's County. We have a very diverse population, and it's divided by the haves versus the have-nots more than it is by color. Prince George's County is 64.6% African American. We have a large population of Hispanics in our community. We do still have some Caucasian brothers and sisters who have lived here for a very long time. And we have a large population of Africans in our community. But the majority of us are African American. The dividing line is the Beltway, the Capital Beltway. And we talk about those who live inside the Beltway and those who live outside the Beltway. And it took me a minute to kind of figure that out. But once I figured it out, it was like, really? Is this what we're doing now? Is the Capital Beltway our new fence? You got to be kidding me. Because what we failed to recognize is we all in the same boat. I'm a lawyer. I'm licensed in the District of Columbia, the state of South Carolina, and I got my license in the state of Maryland. And as I study the statutes in Maryland, as I study the case law, I very quickly recognized that the construction of our statutes in Maryland are not in favor of the people. Not at all. And so even those of us who think we're doing something, we don't even realize that the state is really not our friend.
And
I mean, could you give us examples?
Right, because we've been talking about this on You Be the Judge for a very long time, and when people, by the time common folk get in front of statues and judges, they realize they're on such the back end of the boat that they're going to be pushed off, like the Atlantic slave trade is still going on, and it's crazy.
Plenty of examples. One example, I was in a courtroom arguing a case in front of a trial judge, a circuit court, and I cited a Supreme Court case. The judge looked me square in my face and says, I don't like that case and I'm not going to follow it. What? It's the supreme law of the land. What do you mean you're not going to follow it? And the little devil sitting on my shoulder is thinking, shit, excuse my French, I don't like this case either, but it's precedent. But I let him have it. And thank God we didn't have to appeal the case because it was overcome by events, and that kind of resolved everything for us. But I was shocked to hear a circuit court judge tell me that. And then I started getting clients I got referrals from the NAACP, which kind of tickled my fancy, if you will. And one of the cases that I'm working on now involves county employees who were injured on the job, and they've not been able to get their retirement. And so I've been studying the statute on state retirement. And one thing that's not extremely clear, the way the statute is written, but in implementation is very clear. Once you leave government employment, if you don't claim your retirement within 5 years, you'll never get it.
Wow.
And I went, wait a minute, hold up, time out. You mean to tell me employees are investing their money, every paycheck, into a retirement system, and if you don't work the minimum years required to get the retirement and meet the age limit to get the regular retirement, God help you if you get injured on the job and need to file for disability. Because it's up to a retirement board as to whether you get that disability retirement. And if you don't get it within those first 5 years after your injury and you're removed from the roles as a working employee, you'll never get it.
And we do know who makes up the retirement board. The same people who make up all the other boards. It's the same type of people who make up all the boards across Maryland, which is why Maryland hasn't cracked a circuit court judge. It's the same reason why it is insane what people don't know. And I'm talking good community has no idea how it hurts the people that's disenfranchised consistently. Every time we get to that point, it's like, what is going on? It's not a head scratcher. It makes us angry.
Yes.
Yeah, and just along that line, I don't know if you've had a chance to look at it yet, the recent Supreme Court decision that involved the man who was receiving disability in one of the states, I forgot which one, who then moved to Puerto Rico. And he continued receiving disabilities. The disability board sued him because they wanted $28,000 back, since that was the amount of money that he received in disability since moving to Puerto Rico. And they basically claim if you are living in Puerto Rico, which is part of the United States, Puerto Ricans are United States citizens.
Not according to
If
federal.
you are living in Puerto Rico, you cannot get disability from the United States government. I mean, talk about disenfranchisement. Now we're disenfranchising American citizens who are living in Puerto Rico. And it was an 8-1 decision. And Justice Sotomayor is the only one who dissented from that opinion.
Mm-hmm.
It's amazing what is going on there. I don't know if Will, you have a question, Will? Did you have your hand up?
We do have our other co-host, Judge Claudia Barber. Welcome to You Be the Judge. I see you're at your sister's. Is that what's going on?
I'm actually on her iPad.
Okay.
That's what it is. Because I ran in as fast as I could rather than just run up some steps and get to my regular computer.
So, Judge Barber, after, I know you came on a little bit, but hearing this, we've talked about this several times about what people don't know and how it hurts us. What do you want to say about that?
Well, what I'm hearing, though, is that, what people don't know, they just don't know. And a lot of times the laws, you can also make the comparison with violations of the 14th Amendment, which happen every day. People are not, there's no equal protection under the laws. And I look at that and say, hey, well, then that's just words on paper. And to the extent that you have violations of the 14th Amendment, equal protection under the laws, it was designed, now watch this, the U.S. Constitution, as it was written, yes, it's a constitutional amendment, but even slavery is prohibited under the Constitution. But see, the real catch is that there are no punitive measures that go with violations of the 14th Amendment.
Correct.
And see, that's a big issue, because that means that people can ad nauseum do whatever they want to, use the N word and discriminate in employment opportunities and hire who they want to, promote who they want to, in your face promotions. Oftentimes, any matters when there is rabid, is the best way I can call it, employment discrimination. And we hear it all the time in the legal redress matters we undertake in the NAACP, is that people will get hired with no rules. Mm-hmm. People get promoted with no rules. Mm-hmm. And, it's, connections, opportunity, and who you know. And the fact that they didn't meet the qualifications is put aside. There's a waiver done, something to that effect. Even though there are other qualified applicants in the applicant pool, we're going to jump over those qualified applicants. And the bottom line is, so what? There are no punitive measures. Nobody's going to jail for that.
What could you do about it?
So what?
You can't stop us. You can't stop us.
Well, yeah. And so that's what makes the filing of a charge of discrimination a weak action. The system is designed for it to be a weak action. So that, so what? Tie yourself up in litigation for years. And eventually you may get a possible verdict, but then you may not. And just like you saw Derek Chauvin appeal his conviction, there are 1,000 ways I can get out of this. I'm going to run into a judge that thinks like me. I'm going to run into a judge that's going to overturn your decision that this is rabid discrimination. So, you have that system in place that needs to be fixed. You have that system in place that is designed for people to fail. If you have that system in place, it's designed to have you running around in circles and spinning around in circles, spending thousands and hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees and getting nowhere. That's the crime to me. That's the crime right there.
So, Tonya, you have an idea of why you're running. You gave that statement. What is some of the things that when you get elected, what is the one thing you got to make sure it happens right away?
First things first, we got to educate our people. We got to communicate with our people. We got to tell them what's going on. We got to fix our education system in Prince George's County. I tell people I'm a proud product of the public school system of this nation, and I've done quite well for myself. But it wasn't just about the education system itself. I recognized I had a lot of people who believed in me and invested in me. They invested themselves in me. From school teachers to church members to, my own family, my parents, my grandparents. My grandfather had an 8th grade education. My grandmother, I think, had a 6th grade education. My mom was the first one in our family to graduate from college, and she became a teacher. So when I walked in 6th grade and said, I want to be a lawyer, they're looking at me like, I don't even know where to start. We don't know any lawyers. We don't know how to do this. But they were willing to find the answers to help me get to where I am right now. Unfortunately, in our community, and I'm talking about the African American community, we've been beat down, beat up, turned around so many times. We're tired. I get it. And apathy to some degree has set in. But we've got to educate our people and remotivate them to keep moving forward. And I tell people, this is not about fighting. Ain't nobody got time to fight. Because when you start fighting, the fight's going to continue until you run out of energy. The fight's going to continue until you get tired. And then they'll push you up against the ropes, whoop your tail, and walk away. Nothing changes.
So how do you educate a community that doesn't seem like they're either strolling through a TikTok or snapping at a Snapchat? How do you get to a community that doesn't get their information collectively?
You got to get to them where they are. The one thing I didn't realize, Dr. Paul, was the level of frustration in Prince George's County. Because when you turn on the news, I'm going to pick on the media a little bit. They make it seem like everything's okay. And it's being taken care of. And the media never comes back to verify what they've been told by the people who they interview. Because most of the times they don't interview real people. They interview our elected officials, and they will always put a spin on it and make it look good. Running a grassroots campaign has allowed me the opportunity to literally beat the streets. And I mean talk to people. And I've talked to from children who are still in public school to disconnected youth between the ages of 18 and 25. I've talked to middle-aged, working class adults. I've talked to senior citizens. We are all frustrated about something. And so when I start talking to people and breaking it down in the simplest terms so that they understand it, it's like a breath of fresh air. Because they'll tell you, nobody's ever explained it to me like that before. And that makes so much sense. Mm-hmm. Our people want to know what they don't know. Because right now they're tied up in this tornado, this twister, this vortex that they can't get out of. And the only way they're going to get out of it is to educate them. But you got to do it at their level.
I'm going to open this up to more questions. Does anyone have any questions for Ms. Tonya that we don't have?
Well, I think that what you have said makes a lot of sense, but I know Paul has asked many, many times before, and it's a question that needs to be asked over and over again. Part of the reason why we are where we are at is because the people who need to be most engaged are the least engaged because there's so many things hitting them at the same time. So how do you as a candidate plan to get those people engaged in order for them to vote for you?
We got to strengthen our social safety net. And why we don't have one in Prince George's County, for the life of me, I cannot understand. Because you're absolutely right. We have a population of people, they're just wondering from day to day where they're going to get their next meal from. So they don't have time to be engaged with political issues. They could care less. And I've sat down with my educated friends, and we've talked about that old Maslow hierarchy of needs.
Yeah.
If you don't have the basics, nothing else matters. And so literally, I'm going to start with the basics. We've got to put the social safety net back in place. So we've got to look at, and I'm going to have to deal with the state of Maryland on this, and I'm ready. Let's go. We're going to have to look at our Medicaid system. We're going to have to look at how we issue SNAP benefits, what we used to call food stamps. We're going to have to look at how we deal with affordable housing. We've got to look at our workforce development programs and how we train people for jobs. And I'm scratching my head going, the economists are saying we have thousands of vacancies and nobody's applying for the jobs. Why? We got to deal with that. Is it that they're not trained? Is it they're not prepared? And please don't tell me the lie that people don't want to work. That's a lie. That's a bold-faced lie if I ever heard one. We are not the type of people who want to live off of handouts forever. We do still have some pride. We just need to have our dignity restored.
Some of our underlying issues, there are a multitude of them, and some of it is layered, I think, in addressing this issue of jobs not being filled. Sometimes jobs are not being filled intentionally because the qualifications are over everybody's head, or they put certifications in there as qualifications that are not necessary, but they're designed to repel people from applying for certain positions. And people are sick and tired of these minimum wage, low wage positions where you're just basically doing slave labor. People are tired of that. And I think during the pandemic, there was kind of a push on for people to move and change agenda and find other alternative resources. Why is it that minorities fill the low-level positions in hotels and the low-level positions working in the Department of Public Works in local governments and municipalities? And even there you have, a failure to promote as should be in many situations. So I think that it's a multifaceted problem. But some of this you blame on the workforce itself as not being attractive and not wanting to hire. There are a lot of people that are underemployed, and there are a lot of people that really do want to work, but they have battle scars from bad experiences on the job that may incline employers to turn away. So then there's age discrimination. So, and as I said before, and many times before, just like the whole concept of redlining, don't tell me redlining doesn't exist, and don't tell me age discrimination doesn't exist. It does. And employers get by with it, just as they do all other forms of race discrimination.
All of that exists. Having been a financial regulator for a long time in my career, it does exist. But I'm going to push back on you on something, Judge Barber. We've got to change our narrative about what jobs are attractive and what jobs aren't. Every job in our economy is there because we need it. We need it. And whether you're a landscaper, a sanitation worker, there's nothing wrong with that. You're making an honest living. What I say is we need to make sure we pay you an honest living wage.
You're a socialist. I'm shutting down the show. I'm shutting it down. The FBI's already after me because of Judge Claudia Barbara. And after what you just said there, we got to shut down.
You've done it.
You done it. Look at you. You're a socialist. That's it.
Look, I'm not a socialist by no far stretch of the imagination. But I will tell you, when you look at rent payments, we don't even want to get to the mortgage.
Right.
Let's just look at rent. You can't pay rent making $7.25 an hour.
No.
And that's still our federal.
By the way, some people don't even know that. That is the federal minimum wage.
Yes.
That's it.
People
Yes.
don't know that.
Yes, you can't pay rent making $7.25 an hour. Let's just be real. So that's why I say you got to have a living wage, no matter what job you do. I appreciate sanitation workers. I love them because hell, sometimes I get so busy I can't take my trash out. It is what it is. I appreciate my landscaper because I like cutting my grass, but let's be honest, the life I live right now, I just don't have time to do it every week or every other week. Without them, I can't function. I need them. However, I am willing to pay them for the convenience of having them.
Here's the thing I believe what Gandhi did and Martin Luther King got shot for, and I'm going to say here so it could be my last spoken words. If we shut down Maryland as the underpaid class in Maryland, they will change their tune. If we just stop working, all the people that's delivering, picking up, serving, cleaning, if we just stop for a couple days, probably for about one day, and they'd be like, okay, this has got to stop. Gandhi did it. He shut down all of India, right? Martin Luther King, when he started talking about it, and that bus strike, they were like, okay, you got to get these Negroes back on the bus because we cannot afford to run the company. I think if we did that as a collective of Maryland, they would change their payment understanding and all how they think about a living wage. That's just my thoughts.
Well, don't forget before Dr. King was assassinated, he was involved in a sanitation workers strike, too. Mm-hmm. And that was all about ridiculous wages paid for sanitation workers. It could have been $1.25 or something ridiculous like that. And Memphis had no problem with that. That's just insane.
I have a question because these are all great ideas. I think it was today I heard that Pharrell Williams decided that he was not going to have his big shindig in, is it Virginia Beach?
Virginia.
Yeah, where he grew up.
His cousin
was maybe
killed.
Even grew up in, but instead he's having it in D.C. Mm-hmm. And the reason why he's doing that is because the police shot his cousin a little while ago. And so all that money that was going to go to Virginia Beach in terms of people attending the event, paying for hotels, paying for restaurants and other amenities is now going to go to DC. Now, I agree with what Paul says, and I love what Pharrell Williams is doing, but I don't understand why we cannot do that as a collective. Because Paul's right, if we did that as a collective, we would get the attention of the people who refuse to pay living wages. We would get the attention of the people who refuse to hold police officers accountable. Now, I myself, as a former officer in the military police, I know that there are tons and tons and tons of good police officers there. It's the ones who aren't being held accountable for their bad acts. That's the problem. Talk about, how do they say it? A bad apple spoiling the whole barrel. I don't, because lawyers do it all the time. I don't think lawyers have a problem saying that's a bad lawyer. Don't go to that lawyer, and letting everybody know that, this is what's happening. But for whatever reason in that profession, there seems to be a protection of the profession above all. And so if not only Pharrell Williams, but some other people would do that, it would be so much easier, I think, to get the attention of the people who we need to get the attention of.
Well, I think that if we had a retired police officer come on as a guest, they will share with you, as they have in a lot of our other civil rights association meetings, that the real issue when it comes to the police force is the fact that their pretextual stops and their biased policing has everything to do with the fact that it's entrenched in their system to stop and harass Black motorists more than they do, and arrest them for offenses that they don't do in the same quantity for whites. That is a culture thing, and it's ingrained in them to do this. And to the extent that you get them removed from the force, that's even another heavy lift. And see, that's where the lack of accountability comes into play, when they're not removed from the force for their behavior. Now, we just sitting up here finding out today that the Minneapolis police they've come out with a conclusion, and after an investigation that Minneapolis police have biased over a period of a decade has race discrimination in their police force. Well, newsflash, a lot of the systems are that way.
You're not telling us nothing new. This is nothing new.
That's nothing new. Why are you telling me?
It might be entrenched now, but I don't believe that it has to be. And the reason for that is because, like I said, in the military police, you see something different. I know my commander in the Army, he was very, very specific. He said that we're not going to have any racism, we're not going to have any sexism, we're not going to have any of that stuff. And
love it.
And he said that the reason for that is that when you are out there and people are shooting at you, you don't want that other person to think for just a micro, 1/1000th of a second that you would not put your life on the line the same way that he's putting his life on the line for you. And so that really made us a cohesive group. And that's the way it was. So I really think that it starts with leadership. I really think
it does.
We had the leader.
Agree.
And that's what I agree.
Like
I agree with leadership.
What did they say? The fish starts to rot at the head. That's really is what we're talking about. Because you're always going to have a couple of people who are going rogue, as you might say. But overall, if you have a community of bad leaders, of racist leaders, then the people underneath them, most of them are just going to follow what the leader does. Like, for instance, in Chauvin's case, had his supervisor said, "Hey, bud, we've had 17 complaints about you. You're not walking out this door."
No, one of those 17 complaints should have been sustained.
Exactly.
You see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And you would not have lasted 17 years on a police force if, again, your internal investigation were making the right calls as well.
Because of bad leadership. Even, if for whatever reason you are upsetting people out there in the community, the leader or the supervisor should be saying, "Hey, what is it about you? Is there something that we could do to correct whatever impression you make?"
But
absolutely.
I thought of this when it comes to leadership, and we'll get back to Tonya. If my police officers does something wrong, then everyone above him should also be removed. I thought of that because when it comes to so many years, I'm not talking about 3 years. I'm talking about when a person's been 17 years on the force, has so many complaints, and then something like this happens. The supervisor, the sergeant, the chief, everyone all the way up should be removed.
And and you know why that's a good idea? Because many times these lieutenants and so on are enforcing policies. Why don't you arrest somebody in such a neighborhood? You ought to get your arrests up in order for you to have a positive performance evaluation. That's the wrong message. But see, they're doing that. So yes, it is the supervisors. So I see where the mayor was coming from when after George Floyd's death, he immediately fired the police chief.
Yeah,
he
immediately fired
Derek Chauvin. But see, that wasn't done in Grand Rapids, Michigan.
Yes,
So you go through that and you say, "Hey, this is totally unacceptable, and it will not be tolerated on any level." You see? And the other thing is that, sometimes you believe that if you have a black police chief, things are going to change.
No.
Sometimes they go with the force. And I want to get along with everybody so I can keep my job. They're not about rooting out the bad apples.
Hey, Clarence Thomas educates us every day about everyone that looks like us is not for us. So, Tonya, on our way, does anyone have any questions for Tonya? Because we were on a little bit of a tangent. Does anyone? Go ahead.
I had a question.
Oh, go ahead, girl.
I wanted to know, with the climate that's going on in Florida, and that right wing wanted to censor everything. Is any of that going on in Maryland in the school system? Banning books and
No.
not yet.
Not yet.
Not yet, but I could tell you that. Oh, I'm sorry, Tanya. I didn't mean to speak over you. I could tell you that I think that we should look at the curriculum, because I know when my kids were in middle school, they were reading. They were reading Tom Sawyer. Why can't I think of the author? My gosh, what's the author's name?
Huckleberry Finn.
Mark Twain.
Mark Twain. Thank you very much. Reading Mark Twain. And I called up the teacher and complained about it. And the reason why I called up the teacher and complained about it is because, first of all, I love Mark Twain. I've read him. I think he's witty, as people say. But I thought that should have been a college level book rather than a middle school book. Because what happens with middle schoolers? You teach them a new word, and all of a sudden, what word do they want to use? And so the teacher said to me, "Oh, no, they're not going to use that word. We told them not to." I'm like, what happens when you tell a middle schooler not to use a word? And so I really think that this is something that was problematic to me. First of all, I read a whole lot. And so, I used to read more now than before. But the fact that they keep on teaching the same old books, the same old books over and over again, keeps our kids from getting engaged because they don't see themselves in those books.
Yeah.
And when they get bored and then they start, trying to do things, the teacher says, "Oh, that's a problem student. We have to get rid of them." Well, if you had engaged them in things that interested them, books where they could see themselves in, then you wouldn't have that problem as much. And I really think when we talk about education, we need to talk about those kinds of things, because our kids are not getting engaged, and so they get into trouble for behaviors, and then that leads them down the delinquency path, and that leads them down to the prison pipeline. And I actually heard a Montgomery County candidate a couple of weeks ago said that the school to prison pipeline was a myth, and I almost fell out.
Wow.
I'm like, I can't believe we're arguing that point in this day and age, but we are.
Sometimes people say things to set you off.
Well, that sets me off. Bernadette.
Yeah, hi. First, Ms. Sweat, thank you so much for your willingness to serve, and thanks for being on this call. And I heard from you that your priorities are strengthening the social safety net and educating the community. Could you give us more on your priorities? What would you say are your top 3 to 5 priorities?
What I've done is I divided my priorities into 3 categories: children, community, and the last C is competence. Mm-hmm. Children, I tell people, is always obvious. We've got to train our children. People like to say they're our future. I tell you, they're our present. And if we don't prepare them now for the future, doesn't matter what happens in the future, because they're not going to be ready to deal with it. So we've got to deal with education. We've got to deal with our parks and recreation services. We've got to give our children an outlet. We've not been doing that well in Prince George's County. The second C, community, covers everything else that doesn't directly involve our children. Our elders, our middle-class working families, our low-income working families. Transportation, because public transportation is lackluster at best in Prince George's County. We've got to deal with how we impose special assessments on people. We've got to deal with, everybody's fussing about the taxation in Prince George's County. We've got to educate our community on that, because There are some people who don't want the tax system to change, but they don't understand how it was put in place to begin with. And they don't understand that that nasty word trim that was put in place back in the 70s really ties our hands on what we can do in the county. So we've got to address how we tax our citizens when it comes to real property taxes. We've got a big environmental issue in Prince George's County. Everybody talks about environmental justice. Okay, great. Before we get to the justice part of this, let's talk about the flooding, the bad quality of the water. Let's talk about the toxic waste dumps that the county has allowed because we've given companies 10 to 15-year permits to dump in the county. So we've got to deal with those issues. We've got to deal with those issues. We've got big issues with our small businesses. Small businesses are frustrated because they can't even, not to mention a 10% set aside, they can't even get on the list for contracting. They can't even participate in the procurement process. Some of that's county imposed too. So we've got to rectify that. We've got to deal with our police force. You talk about reforming the police force. Prince George's County just dealt with a lawsuit from its own police and how we were not promoting our police in a fair and equitable way. So we've got to work on our police force internally, as well as deal with rebuilding the trust with the community externally, because we've got lawsuits based upon abusive practices. We've got police who are facing federal charges for tax evasion because of their overtime work or their detail work. So we've got to address that issue. We've got zoning issues we got to deal with. The county council just went through a whole rezoning process, and there are lots of people who are not happy with the outcome. So we got to address that. We've got overdevelopment in the county. It was not smartly planned at all. And because we've allowed rapid development, rapid building of residential homes, we did not consider the infrastructure that was going to take to support the families we've invited into our community.
Well, isn't that part of the developers are in the pockets of some of the politicians that are funding some of these elections?
Say that the wrong. You said that the wrong way. Flip that. Flip that, please.
Is that because some of the politicians are in the pockets of the developers, and this is why?
Absolutely. In Prince George's County, our county council, for reasons I don't quite yet understand, exempted developers from the state-imposed premium when they build on raw land. Our county council voted that they wouldn't have to pay that money. So guess what? Now we don't have the money to build schools. We don't have the money to pave roads. We don't have the money to do sidewalks. And then our crazy county came up with the scheme of imposing special assessments on these communities because they're going to benefit from it. What? You tax the people, but you don't tax the developers who are making the money and
Who are making the money.
taking the wealth of the people out of the county, because the developers who are here are not from Prince George's County. Let's just call it like it is. So our local government.
I bet you they're from Montgomery County.
Yeah, there's a few from Montgomery. They're also from Virginia and a few other places, yes. But our local government is facilitating the transfer of our people's wealth to others. We got to deal with that. So all that falls in that C category, community, because that's huge. It's a lot. And then I say competence. And I knew when I picked that word, that was going to be a double-edged sword because people get offended. But what I need our people to understand is we're governing ourselves in Prince George's County out of ignorance. Another heavy word, I know. And I don't say that to offend or insult anybody. Our local officials are governing from what they don't know. And because they don't know the rules of the game, they get sold a bill of goods, they get hoodwinked, conned, bamboozled, and run amok. and the people suffer. And the politicians in the county don't understand it because, yes, they are in the pockets of the developers. When you look at their campaign finance statements, who's giving them the money? Where's it coming from? Developers. And I tell people that the benefit, if you will, of being a lawyer is I know how to do research. I don't care what name you put on that damn campaign finance statement. I know how to do the research to tie you to who you really belong to. And so, yes, I take the time to do the research to find out where the money is coming from. And so special interest right now is governing Prince George's County. And special interest doesn't give a hootie flute about the people who live here. And that's got to change. And because that has gone on for so long, and the people don't feel like they're ever going to see change. They've lost hope. They've become apathetic. They stopped going to the polls. So when you look at the data of who's voting in Prince George's County, the minority is ruling the county because the majority doesn't even show up. And I'm now explaining to our people that when it comes to elections, your silence is consent. And when you think your one vote doesn't make a difference, let me tell you it does. Because even when you don't get your chosen candidate in office, the candidate who wins takes note of how many people voted against them. And so you need to make your voice heard, even if you're voting against somebody you don't like. We have to stop withholding our vote. We have to stop not showing up on election day. We have to vote to make our voices heard, no matter the outcome. And so that's my competence, educating my people so that they know what they don't know, and then we educate them on that so that they can do better.
Well, I'll tell you, I'll be sending over my protection team to your house tonight so they can surround your building to make sure that you make it to the election day, because I'm not sure. But all jokes aside, the sadness is that this is true, that there's a lot of violent people out there who will don't disagree with you, but know that you're so right that they can't, that your voice cannot be heard. So thank everyone for listening to You Be the Judge. We won't keep everyone too long. We can stay on and have a fireside chat. Again, everyone, we're here every Wednesday at 6 p.m. at You Be the Judge. I'm Dr. Paul Dyer. My lovely co-host is Marilyn Pierre, running for Circuit Court Judge of Montgomery County, and Judge Claudia Barber. Thank everyone, and everyone have a pleasant and beautiful night. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.